stand for. We stand for you men and women who wear the uniform every day. And we have two exemplary members on our board of advisors. Last early December, Corporal Daniel Bulford, who used to protect the Prime Minister, he left because of the tyranny. He left the RCMP because of the absolute tyranny and the corruption within the government of Canada. And after Corporal Danny Bulford retired after protecting both Prime Minister Harper and Prime Minister Trudeau, we had the great privilege of having Corporal Danny Bulford join the Board of Advisors for taking back our freedoms. And it was a sad day about a week ago when Danny had to turn himself in and be arrested. He was arrested for a few hours and then released. But he's an exemplary example of what I've always admired in the RCMP. Another police officer who's joined our Board of Advisors is a man who fought for 24 years as a Calgary City police officer, and his name is Brian Dennison. Brian served his duties well for 24 years as a Calgary City police officer. He just got to the point where he said he couldn't stand staying in a job where they were not remembering the very oath that they took, and they were not standing up for the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and our Constitution. So I call upon all police officers to join in the ethics of Corporal Daniel Bulford and Constable Brian Dennison and hundreds and thousands of officers across the country that I salute to. What I will say is this. The last 2 to 3 weeks in this country has been a sad commentary and a real slap in the face, not only to the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, but when I think of the 16 to 21-year-old boys who stormed the beaches of Normandy and left their blood on the beach, and you think of others who've given their lives for the freedom for this true North, strong and free.
Yeah!
No matter how the tyrannical government of Pierre Trudeau and the tyrannical government of Jason Kenney, we will continue to peacefully assemble. We will continue to peacefully protest. We will continue to stand up for the rule of law. But I'm calling upon you at this peaceful protest today, Premier Kenney. End these mandates unconditionally. Every legislator in this building, in front of us, stand with the Canadian people. Stand on the right side of history and end the mandates unconditionally. I'm also calling upon all Albertans to call for a public inquiry into the collusion between Premier Jason Kenney and the Alberta government and the Alberta Health Services and the College of Physicians and Surgeons. And the reason I say that, I have a friend, I won't name his name, but I spoke to him 3 weeks ago. And he's a trucker from southern Alberta. And his 31-year-old daughter and her husband, she succumbed on January 6th in a community south of Okotoks to the deadly jab. And it was her third, they called it a booster. It was a killer. She took the jab against her will on the 6th of January, and within 2 weeks, she passed away. Any way you cut it, Premier Kenney, you call for mandates for these vaccines, and you never recognize the death. And I believe in the rule of law, but I believe we need to have a public inquiry into the criminality that has happened under the watch of Premier Jason Kenney. And I can say this, there's a criminal investigation going on now into the death of Sean Hartman. And let me put a face to what this is really all about, ladies and gentlemen. From 1986 to 1991, I volunteered for an organization called Victims of Violence. The people I worked with, their son was killed by Clifford Olson. And I had the privilege from 1989 to 91 to spearheading Canada's first and only ever unsolved homicide project. Never realizing 30 years later, I'd find myself in the same position again, only this time, the criminals weren't the Clifford Olsons. They were people within our very government, within our very health services, within our very college of physicians and surgeons, who will stand by and order us to mandate us to put a jab in our arm with no consequences for personal freedom, for informed consent, or the choice to decide what we're going to put into our own bodies. And such was the case of a trucker friend of mine. He's become a very good friend of mine. And I'll leave you with this. His name is Dan Hartman. He's become a good friend of mine. He drives a big rig out of Barrie, Ontario. I spoke to Dan a couple of months ago. On August 25th, his 17-year-old son, in fact his only son, great aspiring hockey player, wanted to play once again last fall. Could have even possibly been an NHLer one day. Because he wanted to play hockey, without informing his dad, he took the jab on the 25th of August last summer in Barrie, Ontario. He shared with his dad, almost ashamedly, on Labor Day weekend what he had done. And they had a little good cry together, because he also told his dad he had some pains in his chest. And on the 27th of December, 17-year-old Sean Hartman died. I spoke at a peaceful protest. And I say a peaceful protest. I'll say it again. A peaceful protest in Ottawa on the 31st of January, 3 weeks ago, on Parliament Hill. Before I went up to speak, I phoned Dan and I said, "Can I commemorate your son today? This is his 18th birthday." And Dan said, "I'd be honored if you did." And I went up on the stage and I spoke about these things. And then I asked the entire audience to give me a moment's silence to remember Sean on what should have been his 18th birthday. And at the end, I asked for the church bells. The church bells parked along Wellington Street. And every other church bells with all those other truckers. These truckers are Canadian and international heroes. I call upon the government of Canada to release Tamara Leach. Release her. She is not a criminal. She is a peaceful protester. She is a Canadian hero. I call upon Premier Jason Kenney to call for the release of Pastor Pawlowski. He is in the remand center in Calgary. He is a Canadian hero. At the end of the moment of silence for Sean Hartman's memory, there was a cheer and there was, I call them church bells. The truckers honked their horns as loud as I've ever heard and as long as I've ever heard. So all I ask all Canadians, we're at a dire strait in Canadian history. The odds are against us, but it says in Romans 8, God is for us. And it also says, if God be for us, who can be against us? This is what we have. We stand for truth. Everyone here is on the right side of history today. And as Winston Churchill said in the fall of 1941, let's join him in that same resolve. We will never give up. Never, never, never.
Never give
I call upon all Albertans, all Canadians, to join in massive, 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 massive numbers over the course of the next 30 days. And I call upon all Albertans to call every single member of Parliament every single day so they don't get to renew these god-awful Emergency Act mandates. We need our freedom back. And are we going to take back our freedoms? If you believe so, help me in 3 times. We are going to taking back our freedoms. Taking back our freedoms. Taking back our freedoms. God bless you. I love you.
Oh, we got him. I know. You're gonna have to do the marking. But the marking is supposed to give you 2 hours. We started late. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you so much, George.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Some wise words.
Hold up for a second.
As he was talking about the deaths from the horrible jab, it reminded me of a little trip my friend Selena Paley and I took up to Saskatchewan a couple months ago. I went there to meet a lady, and a couple of ladies actually. They had a friend and daughter die. Her name was Jolene. She was 39 years old. She just wanted to go on a trip for her birthday. She had went in 8 different times to go get the vaccine and walked out. On the 9th time she went in, it was her best friend's birthday.
They're fine with taking pictures.
3 days later, she was dead. All of her bodily functions had stopped. So Selena and I went up for a little visit to go to the pharmacy where she was jabbed. Jolene's death was reported as a COVID death. So we got the process starting. We went in and did a little undercover investigation and we had the pharmacy change it to a vaccine injury death.
Yeah!
We can't let them continue to mark these deaths as COVID. My uncle died of a brain aneurysm. And he was marked as a COVID death. Like, come on. Anyway, I'm going to ramble on, so I'm going to introduce our next speaker, even though he doesn't really even need an introduction. He's been speaking out against the lockdowns and mandates and has gained worldwide attention. He specializes in pathology, is a graduate of Cambridge University and a fellow to the College to American Pathologists and the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons. During his long career, he has held many leadership roles in the Canadian medicine, both provincially and nationally, including as a university professor, National Pathology Board examiner, and laboratory accreditation inspector. His dedication and commitment as a physician and public health advocate also made him a previous Citizen of the Year, right here in Edmonton. Please help me welcome Dr. Roger Hodgkinson!
Thank you, Roger.
Hello, freedom fighters! You're right and they're wrong! And I'm going to tell you why. But first of all, let me tell you, I was in Ottawa with George 2.5 weeks. I saw everything there. I left on Tuesday before the jackboots arrived. The demonstration was incredibly peaceful. There were honks, horns honking. a demonstration of indignation about the assault on the Canadian public. Let me be clear about what precipitated this action by the truckers. And by the way, thank God for the truckers! Decent men and women with their families who were there simply for one reason and one reason only. They did not want to put their bodies on the line to take a vaccination to maintain their income. That is why they were there. This is a medical matter, but before I get into the details of that, let me elaborate on Ottawa. I walk the streets day and night, soup kitchens, children holding shoe boxes with signs on it that they wrote themselves. This was an incredible outpouring, the biggest demonstration that Canada has ever seen, and the number of Canadian flags was phenomenal. These were patriots standing up for their freedom, not to put their body on the line to please the new gods that live in parliaments of this country. You're probably aware of the fact that they've now left Ottawa. That was not a defeat. That was a victory! They stood there for you and for the world. I'll come to that in a minute. It was a real victory. It was simply a tactical retreat, simply to regroup and get ready for the next phase. Just remember for a minute, if it hadn't been for these guys with dirty fingernails, missing teeth, smokers, tattooed, but wonderful men and women who knew an enormous amount of what was going on because they spent hours in their cab getting educated. They knew what was happening. That's why they were objecting. Wonderful men and women and children to boot. And you know what? I actually went in one of the cabs. I always wondered what it was like in one of those things behind the driver's seat in those big semis, you know? And I sat in there and I pulled the bloody horn. Was that energizing? I can't tell you, to be part of it. No, that's a tactical retreat. You've heard that the Americans are putting on their own convoys. There'll be a multiple of convoys in the States that will make the Canadian ones look rather small. And that is going to maintain the international momentum and keep it in the public eye. Make no mistake, this matter is not going to be resolved in any of these buildings or in Parliament in Canada. It's going to be resolved in the court of opinion internationally. We are being made out internationally to be absolute fools, led by a Prime Minister who, I have to be very careful with my expletives here, who has no right to govern because of what he's doing is tyrannical. It is totally opposite to the Charter of Rights and Freedoms that Brian Peckford had his signature on, and I met the man in Ottawa. Brian Peckford was sick. He took a long trip out and an even longer trip back. A bold man, a brave man, an indignant man. And he's here to lead this charge, and he's chairman of the Taking Back Our Freedoms organization, which you must all visit. You've got to ask yourself, how can this all be happening when the entire world is recognizing that it's over? Repeat after me. O-V-E-E-R. Over. It's over. And yet they're still hanging on to the levers of power. Just power grubbers. That's all they are. We are the citizens. We control them, and they should know that. Seven provinces have opposed this Emergency Measures Act. Not all of them, but a significant number. Austria has folded. Do you remember how draconian they were? They've done 180 degrees. They're now scrapping things. And so is the UK, all the mandates. Look, this is the same virus, the same demographics, totally different approaches. Many countries are getting rid of them, and here they're doubling down, not only on the mandates, but draconian legislation, martial law, and it's got to stop. This is not a political matter, it's a medical matter. And I'm going to elaborate on that for you, because that is the underpinning of what's going on now. Medical madness, governments playing medicine, and it's a guaranteed failure when governments start doing that and controlling doctors and how they can handle their own private practice. That has got to stop as well. The latest scariant, let's call it, Omicron. Omicron is nothing worse than a bad cold, all right? Bad colds kill some people, believe it or not, ordinary colds. I'm not being callous when I say this. Every single life matters. I'm a physician, for God's sake. Every single life matters. Omicron could be considered the last version of the vaccine. It's cheap, it's immediately available, and it doesn't kill you. So it should be used liberally on everybody to build herd immunity the natural way. You've heard me say it before. Remember in a time called BC, before COVID? Do you remember that time? When you lab rats were free? When you could eat in a restaurant, when you could hug your grandchildren, when you could go to funerals. Remember that time? That's going to come back. That's going to come back because it's over. It's over. It's just a hand-wringing. And our Prime Minister simply doesn't want to lose face. It's as simple as that. His daddy told him in a seance one morning, you know, to bring in the police, right? Trample them down, bring in the War Measures Act, that'll control them. That was his daddy talking.
You got it? Oh, okay.
Omicron is the new vaccine. There's no need to take boosters. Absolutely not. Cumulative boosters increase the risk of you dying from the clot shot. Let's review the mandates. I'm saying this with some authority. Nothing worked. Repeat after me. Nothing worked. Nothing worked. Nothing could work, because we'd have figured that out with previous flu epidemics in medicine. Of course we would have done something in sophisticated medicine if we could control an upper respiratory tract viral pandemic. Of course we would do it. But there was no method known to medical science. None. But what did they do? They brought in all these mandates that were known not to work. Let's deal with them one at a time. Masks.
Don't work.
Let's call them barriers for respiration.
Yes.
Let's call them muzzles.
Muscles, yeah.
Because they'd look out of these windows over here and they'd see people walking around with muzzles. And what does that tell them? We've got them. They're complying. Just look. That's what they would be thinking, seeing when they would walk around the grocery stores themselves. They would see compliance. Compliance. And why did the compliance happen? Because people have been kept ignorant. But we'll come to that. Masks don't work. It's like trying to control mosquitoes with a chain link fence. It cannot work. Social distancing doesn't work. This virus is spread by aerosols, not by surface contact. Forget the theatre, the pure theatre of rubbing those disinfectants on your hands. They do nothing. You can get this virus in an empty aisle in Walmart as readily as standing in the lineup